The file looks ordinary. Header info, a tiny waveform. And then, at 2 minutes and 13 seconds, her voice cuts in. Mara. And whatever comes next is gone. Not muffled, not faint. Gone. As if the air itself swallowed dissyllables.
You can see the shape where words should be. You can measure it, but you cannot hear it. Listen closely now. Do you feel that?
Find somewhere dark and quiet. Put your headphones on. Tonight's story is called The Valley That Took the Sound.
Content note. This episode describes loss of voice, missing recordings, and muteness as an effect. If that unsettles you, consider pausing and returning later. Otherwise, stay with me.
Myra Reyes was 32.
She taught biology at the community college, carried a battered field recorder, and went hiking every Sunday.
Do you feel that? She loved small maps. Coffee too strong. Her father's laugh.
Her last hike was on August 14, 2023. She carried a Tascam DR40X, nothing exotic, the kind of recorder field biologists use for birdsong, and she kept a daily log of soundscapes for a small research project.
Photographs of the valley make it look harmless. Rolling meadows, a river ribboning through, trees leaning inward like listeners. In summer, the air smells of warm pine and sun-baked stone. There's a highway hum off in the distance. People picnic there. People take pictures. They talk. Until they don't.
Locals avoid the word quiet. They call it the quiet, with a caution in their voice, the way you say a bruise. They tell stories about radios dropping to hiss, about tapes that open with whole paragraphs missing. Most shrug it off at first. Then they start sending you files.
Mara's morning entry was cheerful. Birds, the river, soggy boots, and a joke about the map. Then the gap. Her waveform holds a footprint, the syllable Mara, and after it, the trace flattens to nothing. Engineers ran it 3 ways: noise reduction, spectrogram analysis, phase inversion. The shape remained. The sound did not.
A ranger told me his handheld radio dropped from perfect clarity into static as he drove the ridge. He described a pressure in his ears, like stepping underwater. He stopped, listened, silence, and the static held. His log showed the gap, but not the reason. He shrugged, then seemed to tuck the moment away.
A neighbor swore he heard a distant whistle at noon, the kind hikers use, and turned to answer. He said everything else had gone quiet. No birds, no river, just a hollow that felt loud because all the rest was taken. Notice the silence.
There was an older report, 10 years prior, about a man who wandered out of the valley and couldn't speak for weeks. He used gestures, frantic sketches, pages of blank speech bubbles. Officials called it psychosomatic. Neighbors called it evidence.
When patterns repeat, coincidence becomes a theory that needs testing. Over months, I mapped returned hikers, missing audio files, and the townsfolk's quiet warnings. Voices cut mid-word, recorders finished files and opened to emptiness. People could hum, cough, laugh, no problem, but words often gone.
We brought mics, spectrum analyzers, notebooks full of hypotheses.
At first, everything behaved. Birds, wind, the river.
Then the instruments began to lie.
A volunteer looked at his screen and said, "It felt like my voice was being pulled out," and we all stopped.
There were 7 of us that day, 2 rangers, 3 grad students, 1 local naturalist, and Mara's former student who wanted answers. At first we joked, scientific bravado, you know. Then the gear started to fail in specific ways.
A microphone would show a crest on its readout, but play silence. A high-end recorder would produce a file that, when opened, was blank. One grad student tapped his device and whispered, "I can feel it, my words thinning." He could hum, he could laugh, he could not for a time articulate why his hands were trembling.
On the ridge, a ranger's call clipped out mid-name. He kept speaking, no sound. Minutes later, he could talk again, but his report came back in fragments. Memory was intact. Language was not. That distinction matters. It changes how you investigate something that steals testimony.
One volunteer, firm, practical, refused to go deeper. She said she wasn't afraid of cliffs or bears. She was afraid of coming back without the words to tell us why. That fear is precise. Losing your voice is not just losing sound. It's losing proof.
We pressed toward the valley's center, where the trees leaned like a mouth closing. Moss thickened underfoot. The air felt made of fabric. Footsteps softened. A whisper scraped, and then flattened. The core changes distance. Sound stops traveling the way it should.
There's a moment in the core you can point to, a slide from texture to vacuum. Sounds thin until they are not missing, but refused.
One of us said, "Do you feel that?" And the words didn't travel. Not because of mouth or ear, because the place intercepted them. The student later played back her own file and found gaps where her fingers tapped the recorder. She came back able to hum every melody she knew, except the sentences she'd been saying while walking.
We retreated with less certainty than we'd carried in. Mara's pack was found on a ledge, water bottle full, map unfolded, field notebook missing its final page. Prints led into scrub, and none came out. That pattern echoes through older reports. Enter with language, return with gesture.
Investigators do what they can. Forensics measures absence. Linguists test limits. What consonants survive, what vowels vanish. Therapists teach survivors new ways to tell what happened when words are stolen. But courts and families need testimony. Without it, blame evaporates and grief calcifies.
Survivors carry strange proofs. The look of a listener when someone mimes a word and the horror is understood. A pattern on a scarf remembered in lieu of a sentence. Memory becomes its own language. Pay attention to the details. Months later, a file surfaced from a hiker who'd come back. For 30 seconds, it's just wind and river. Then, near the end, a tiny human sound appears. A breathy, off-mic whisper. Lean in. It's fragile. A name, whispered and almost lost. It lands and flutters away. The name doesn't answer our questions. It won't heal the missing pages. But for a brief moment, the valley returned something small and human. That smallness feels like a choice or a concession.
If you're still here, it means the story followed you to the end. Take a breath. Look around your room. Make sure everything is exactly where you left it.
The valley taught us something ugly and precise. Silence can be an act of taking testimony, taking story, taking proof. The cost is social as much as physical. People who lose language lose the way to be believed.
I'm Samnang. If this episode stayed with you, share it with someone who listens in the dark. Subscribe to Nature's Dread so you never miss a story that makes the world feel a little less safe and a little more listenable.
Until next time, check the corners. The night remembers.
Good night.